Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the show. We're running a little bit late,
Yes.
but for the ones that are watching, thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure you share the links with your social media and do the click the like button to help spread the word that we're doing these
Yes.
shows. We do these shows usually every other week. And also in the description box, please click the link to John's website, and that will take you to his readings and his periodical where you can sign up. We're going to talk about that later in the show about what that all entails. But please go to John's website and sign up and help support the work that he does. So, John, we were talking a lot behind the scenes about music and other things. So, where do you want to begin?
Oh, well, I think we'll start with something. We have some amazing things to share in this show. But I think one I didn't talk about before the show is, probably a lot of people are wondering why I'm not talking about Three Eye Atlas yet on these shows. The mysterious object that has entered from deep interstellar space into our neighborhood of Sol. That's the name of our little neighborhood because our sun is named Sol. And so some dear friends of mine were like calling me and say, what do you think about this thing? And why have you been so quiet? And I said, well, because there's a whole lot of noise going on about it, a whole lot of excitement, a whole lot of hair on fire stuff going on about it, a whole lot of stuff that may not be true, a whole lot more stuff that may be projected upon by people's hopes and fears. I would just simply start by saying I'm on the record for decades now, especially on Coast to Coast, because George Noory would periodically ask me, and I think Art Bell used to as well, uh, when there would come a time where it was just unquestionably there that we know without a doubt that there are other intelligent civilizations out there. And one of the way I've evolved my look at that has been um, a variation on what I'm about to say about this Three Eye Atlas. I guess that's what they call it. And so um, I've always had the feeling that we will discover them rather than they imposing themselves upon us. And because if we then discover them, it is our act of free will as a species to discover them. And it would be a very bad move. I think a lot of the God stories and Apollo and all this other stuff where somebody were kind of godlike aliens that were not following the prime directive from Star Trek. Don't force people into evolution in a violent way. It's almost like, when somebody sexually abuses somebody. I've had friends of mine and who have said, women and men who have said when they were forced into a sexuality long before they were really naturally ready for it, it said suddenly I had all these feelings that I couldn't deal with because this is too soon. I'm still a child. And in a way, the human race would be in somewhat abused by civilizations that would impose advanced ideas that maybe we're not ready for yet. I mean, everybody has their own timing for things, um, especially since the universe its source is timeless. So it's always here now and it's ready. But but for us, it's perceived differently unless you get in that space of witnessing that is timeless inside you. So the thing is, so I was saying we'll discover them. And So I also started later, decades later, to say when I thought the window would open, and I've always been saying it would open in the second half of the 2020s, the second half of the 2020s is when this big discovery will be known. So, so here we are near the tail end of 2025. We will have officially, by New Year's, be passing into the second half of the 2020s. And so I'm thinking that I'm looking closely but quietly at what's going on with this anomaly that has shown up in our um, solar system. I mean, it's doing some very unusual things, but as some physicists will remind us, is that it's possible. I mean, the fact that it's so luminous, the fact that it seems to be reflecting light, the fact that it is moving faster when it should be slowing down if it were a comet. There are very unusual things, but do not jump if you have any scientific inquiry. Do not jump into presuming that something that is could also just be a rock from another part of the galaxy where there's different physics going on. I mean, some of the people have also said these things. I would simply say, I suggest to do what I do about UFOs, and I've seen a lot of UFOs. One of these days, I should do a show where I talk about all the different things I've experienced and verified while it was happening. I mean, just to give you one bit, I'm going to write a book called The Ghosts of Rajneeshpuram. And in it, that's the commune in Oregon, Osho's the Rajneesh commune, which I'm a member of, and I was there as a resident for nearly 4 years. And because of the spiritual things that were going on there, because of the Buddha field that Osho was sending out about 21-mile radius all around the area, it was a very interesting place if you work with the dead or things that are interdimensional or stuff, as I claim to do, because all kinds of souls were hovering around that area, trying to find a way to be born in that energy. And I remember sometimes when I'd be dancing ecstatically with thousands of other people in our 2.5-acre long and wide Rajneesh Mandir, our main hall, which we started as a greenhouse, but really we were turning it into a building. And sometimes you might be aware of this when you're in a static space. You you see inside without your eyes what's going on outside that your normal eyes can't see. And I remember dancing, I would feel them. I would feel the entire ceiling of the greenhouse. Our high ceiling was like a, a, a mass of thousands of souls watching us. Where for every one person that was dancing of the thousands there were like thousands and thousands more that were waiting and watching, just hovering there. Hard to define where they began and where they ended with each other. They were all kind of tangled together. And um, so this is also a kind of discovery. When do you experience it's always good to on your own discover these things rather than be forced to see these things. But anyway, about this subject, um, I still don't know what it is. uh, I know my bias about it is that if I were a ufologist, I would be I would be even harder than a cynic, which is mistakenly called a skeptic by most people who don't know the real meaning of the word skeptic. They use it like the word cynic. And except for Rachel Blevins, one of my sources, of all my other sources, really brilliant people, Rachel Blavin's out there, very, very good blogger to watch. She's in Houston. She actually said, I'm cynical about what you said, just like I do on Coast to Coast AM. And except for her and me, I haven't heard anybody do that because cynic it's honest. It's saying, I have a bias against what you've said. And I'm openly saying that I don't believe that's possible. And that's it. I'm not going to say, well, I'm skeptical about that when the skepticism means to observe and investigate without a front-loaded bias. So, so the way I like to be a cynic is, I can't say I'm a cynic about UFOs because I've seen them and I've had interactions with some very strange folk that not are really from this dimension. So, so I would say, in the case of this object, um, I want so much for it to be true that I will do my worst to prove that it isn't. I'm taking my time with this. I will write about it in my next Hogue Prophecy report is coming out in February, as I usually do. It'll be the predictions for the next 12 years. Oh, it's 12 months, sorry. With me, they're like years with everything that's going on these days. I don't know what it is. I think there's a lot of noise out there. I think there's also a lot of obfuscation going on. I find it very interesting that the army, the thousands of amateur astronomers who are really good at what they're doing, who are taking amazing pictures, NASA is clearly not showing, when they show examples, they're all fuzzy and screw in. And then this guy just showed one of his, and I know he's legit, it just showed one of his elongated, glowing, bluish things with the stars around it, that he did a special slow filming process that really bring out the light, which these people with their billions can do, but they're not doing it, and that's got me suspicious. And I understand why. If Rendezvous with Rama was Arthur C. Clarke's prophecy about the first contact, and then we've seen Star Trek, The First Contact, and all these other things, and if it's completely confirmed that there are others out there, what do you think that's going to do to all the world governments and businesses that want to keep us all divided and against each other? Um, the idea war might disappear, the war as we've known it, if we realize that there's, with any alien civilization that exists, we can prove exists, there can also be a threat. So as Arthur C. Clarke said in one of his books, I think it was the 2001, 2010, 2050, those kind of books. He said, well, when we realized that there was actually life on Europa, um, it kind of changed the whole gestalt of we had to come together. Now we're all together in this threat. We have to stand together. We have to stop wasting our time fighting each other and doing all these silly things and wasteful things. We have to start being one as a species, because now we know we're not alone, and that is not only wonderful, but it's also a threat. It's like we could be the American Native American Indians who are making many prophecies about the coming of the white brother from the east. Quetzalcoatl is one of them. I did a whole, in my book of the Hopi, the Essential Hopi Prophecies, one of my most popular books. You can get it on Amazon as an ebook or as a short. It's a little small book, very popular. And I go through all the prophecies, the best prophecies from the 500 nations of Native American people, and how they saw it coming. They saw a collective vision of people with pale faces and beards, with very large deer, horses, Didn't have horses in the New World, so-called New World. It's just as old as the other part of the world, but new to our conceit as Europeans and Eurasian Africans have not been there. So, so anyway, and they were seeing that they would have these thunder sticks. That if they pointed at an animal or a person, the thunder stick would clap like thunder and people would drop dead. And there were visions of that, and I quote them. And then there was the famous situation where Montezuma um, was in Aztecs lands. They were also thinking it's coming, the white brother is coming. This concept of Pahana, which is what the Hopi call it, almost all the 500 tribes of Native American people in North, Central, and South America have a similar vision of people coming. Now, the most fundamental vision is the Hopi, because it's 1,000 years they were seeing it. They were seeing this coming 1,000 years before it happened. And it basically was, the story is that the divine spirit created two brothers. One was the older white brother, and the other was the younger, more innocent red brother. The white brother's powers was the powers of mind and intellect and inventions. The red brother was a part of the soul of the earth and farming and cultivation and making life. And so when the red brother was going to stay in his fields in Turtle Island, which if you actually look at from space at North America, the outline, you can see the turtle in it. I don't know how the Hopi knew that, but there it is. Um, so Turtle Island, he left Pahana, the white Pahana left the land of the red people and his red brother. And so the Great Spirit said to the red brother and the people remaining, when he comes back, beware. Because he broke a tablet, the Great Spirit, and gave one to the red brother and one to the white brother. And he said, now watch, when he comes back with his tablet, if he has a circle on it, he is the true white brother, and he will share his, left brain to the right brain technology and stuff in harmony with cultivation and life. But beware, if he comes back and upon his broken tablet is the cross, the cross. He is false Pahana. He has come to bring woe to the red race. And so, when so Montezuma was looking in the feathers of a certain bird to do scrying. They used to do, the Aztecs prophets, they used to scry by holding this bird and looking at the back of his head with all his indigo feathers, and then they would see the future. And this was about over a dozen years before Cortez and his ships came. He saw visions of the deer, of the thunder guns, he saw these huge canoes, which were larger than anything that we had ever seen in Aztec lands. And they had huge red crosses on them. And so he wasn't seemingly aware of that prophecy. But anyway, because the Aztecs, when they met Cortez, they welcomed him as a guest. And he kind of exploited that with his little band, to defeat this largest empire in the Americas, a vast empire, the Aztec Empire, because they were hoodwinked into thinking that he was the great white Pahana come back. But apparently they either lost the thread of the cross warning or never had it in their version of it. The Hopi had it. When the Hopi saw their first Spaniard conquistadors, they immediately recognized what this was about. And by the way, they're the only Native Americans, because they knew it was coming. They prepared themselves and they kicked them out. Eventually, after a century, they kicked all the Spanish out, and their churches, everything. They had a rebellion. They were the only successful Native American rebellion against the false Pahana's invasion from the east. So there are good and evil reasons why, for the greater good of humanity, a lot of things that, a lot of the control factors in our world, a lot of the things that the power elites and all are not going to like, inconvertible evidence that this thing is actually some kind of alien, ancient alien ship that is scanning us. Um, and there's a lot of things point to that, but I can't say I'd like to have the proof. I'd like to at least follow as a human being who I visualized in these visions will have to discover it on themselves. We will have to see that they are there, even even now. So so it's coming. I mean, it's not going to come suddenly. It's been coming on us really quite swiftly in the 2020s. So many things I predicted the 2020s would be as a axis shift, a new direction or a new end to the human future. I was seeing these things since 1990 about the 2020s. That's why I named them the Roaring 2020s. And they have certainly fulfilled, and now they're coming into their second half, which is even more revolutionary and more world changing, epochal changing. And a lot of these powers, a lot of these idiots in Congress, a lot of these people who want to fight their wars and do their genocides and all of that, um, having some power outside of this world that we have to unite against will mean the end of a lot of their proclivities, a lot of their, I mean, humanity will be changed by this completely. And so, it's the powers are not going to very easily allow un un well, evidence that you can't deny, because they're always about keeping their control. They're always about that. It's all about power for them. And anything that might waken us up, the masses, is also a threat. Because if we wake up, sometimes we roll out the guillotines for these kind of people, and just or we send them to Siberia or something and have a Bolshevik revolution or something like that. I mean, these revolutions, bad or good, and they all have both aspects in them. Because as I've said, revolutions are, I have a rhyming word for what they mostly are, react illusions. You have an illusory power game that you want to overthrow, and then you end up replacing it with another power game. Interaction, a reaction illusion, revolution. So, but the other meaning of it is a new age, a revolving, a changing of an age. Revolu or revolution in Old French is they'll talk about the completed revolution of the month. That's constantly Nostradamus is speaking that way in 16th century French. He's talking about how the month evolving from its first day to its end is a revolution of 30 or 31 days, or a lunar revolution if you're in the lunar calendar, and he was in the Julian calendar. So yeah, it's so stay tuned. I will have some more things to say about that in February. But now, um, yeah, there's definitely a lot of things going on. I mean, there's the other things that Paul and I were going to talk about were, well, the let's hit them with the real biggie. I've only come across the information on this about 10 days ago. Um, you know, long story short, it's called Operation Southern Spear. I mean, this is this attack on Venezuela by a huge fleet of about 14% of the entire U.S. Navy is on station off the coast of Venezuela. Um, a country which, if we invaded it, would be Vietnam on steroids. You think Vietnam was mountainous and full of impassable jungles? This this is a huge country. Uh, a third of the lower 48 states is the same size as Venezuela, where all the resources of oil and gas, which they think is the biggest ever yet discovered anywhere, is out in the impenetrable mountain forests of Venezuela. Most of the people live on the coast. Most of the people live in a few urban centers like Caracas. And um, I really think that it's not one of Trump's uh, positive hyperbole or whatever, shock and awe, and then he wants to talk. My sense is they really are dumb enough in Washington to go to war there, and they want to, and they're there still because they want to do it. So, what stopped them? Something stopped them because they even came down just, I don't think they were going, oh yeah, we're going to hit. No, they were going to hit. They even finally, this is usually what we do in our wars of America, raping and pillaging countries. Um, we used to just destroy villages to save them in Vietnam. Now we destroy and render into failed states entire nations. Iraq, Libya, Somalia. We just destroy them and move on. Um, and there is definitely a real energy to do that with Venezuela, but really get ourselves in a mess. So, so I wondered, why are they hanging there? You don't have a fleet there hanging like that. A fleet that's burning billions of dollars just being there. You don't have the largest aircraft carrier. You don't have that much of the U.S. Navy there with 12,000 other soldiers stationed on Puerto Rico to be added to the 2,000 or 3,000 that are on board with the Marines. Uh, I mean, well, what may have happened, I stumbled upon John Mearsheimer about 10 days ago making a comment, and he's really one of the finest sources I have out there online. Check him out. He's almost 100% accurate on everything, as are the two Greeks, Alexander Christoforou and or Alex Christoforou and Alexander Mercouris, are also incredibly good sources and really rarely get it wrong. And I've been watching Mercouris since 2011, and it's such a rare thing. It's memorable when he gets something wrong. And he's just very matter of fact. He just has a sense of global understanding that's quite remarkable. And if you notice, a lot of my accuracy depends on such people, which I have vetted over 30 years. Um, and I've taken a long time to gather my sources, and that's why it'd be so great if you really are interested in finding out what's going on in the world. If you subscribe to the Hogue Prophecy Report, you're not just getting my unusual prophetic historic take on things. You're going to get all my sources because I list them, I link them, and you can then go to them and then go to their sources, and you will discover I kind of want you to do that with me. Not use me as a doorway, as some of the people like Peter Lavelle of Crosstalk did in 2012 in Russia Today. Peter Lavelle was like, I haven't met him yet, but I'd love to say, you're one of my gatekeepers. You're the one that opened the gate to, because you had all these amazing people like Mercouris and other people on the show. And then I started to go watch them as I watch you, and I literally, the alternative media is the real media now. If you're still watching the mainstream media and not going to see, not kicking the tire of the mainstream media by watching the alternative media, you're being made a fool. Because those people that's all they can do. They are fools. They have become idiots and fools. And I don't speak just as somebody who has watched them, I have been on their shows. I used to debate, um, Sean Hannity. I used to do Fox. I used to be on CNN. I used to be on MSNBC. I did Secrets, Ancient Prophecies on NBC in a 2-hour show that shut down the network so much that so many millions of people were watching it out of the blue that they had to shut down the phone system because it was overheating in downtown in Midtown Manhattan. It was overheating. And this was when the first episode happened, and I had a 15-minute segment on it. Was in an hour, in 2 hours. They um, we were competing against the Grammys, I think on ABC, and the famous, the gal who was kind of crust, working class kind of gal with John Goodman as her husband. And there was going to be the famous moment where you're going to see two girls kissing, so big, big TV moments, two lesbian love affair. It was all very big deal right then in 1994. So we were thinking that nobody would watch the show, but it was almost like this is the closest thing I could ever come to being in Orson Welles' Mercury Theater doing the War of the Worlds. Suddenly, everybody was watching us, and it was so much of an impact that they then did three more parts to it, three more 2-hour parts over a few years' time. And I enjoyed in all four of them a 15-minute segment, just me talking about things and showing stuff with all the high tech and all that. So, um, that really put prophecy on the map as one of the mainstream interests in media. So the thing that I stumbled upon with John Mearsheimer is that I knew that there were Russian ships there, military ships, missile frigates on station, also near the U.S., closer to Venezuela. But I discovered and verified that those ships are not just there, they're deterrents. Those warships have Onyx anti-ship hypersonic missiles, something that the United States Navy has absolutely no ability to shoot down. And if you've been watching all these supply planes coming in and out of Caracas and bases in Venezuela and unloading, well, now we know what they're unloading. Maybe dozens, if not more, S-400, top of the line, anti-missile, anti-ballistic defense systems. So the Russian system is decades ahead of us. Our Patriot missiles can't even hit anything. Uh, these are the top of the order, and perhaps even being crewed by Russian advisors. I was watching K-19, The Widowmaker last night, so good movie. So what we have here is a potential. So far, so good. The Russians have have ended the Monroe Doctrine. And who the hell is America to say these two continents are ours? Sorry, Mr. Monroe. And by the way, when I write about the Monroe Doctrine, I'm going to share with my readers what Monroe said before Congress when he was considering it. And his entire message at the opening was, don't be dumb enough to get into regime changes. Don't invade the local countries. He was against everything we're doing. And he's the guy that created the Monroe Doctrine. So I'm also going to have to re-educate myself and also share that with all of you, how the way the Monroe Doctrine is being interpreted is perhaps not what Monroe ever intended. His was more the issue of threats from Europe. His focus with the Monroe Doctrine was not to dominate and bully Northern and Southern American states of the Western Hemisphere. That thing was about him warning European empires and powers, the British Empire, the Virgin and other empires, the Spanish Empire, all that was going on. Stay out of this region of American peoples, North and South and Central. I think it has more of that in it. But this whole idea is that, I mean, who the hell are we to claim the Western Hemisphere as ours? You know, that's that's very colonial. It's very fascist. And why don't we concern ourselves more with if we want a nation build, why don't we nation build the United States? It really needs it. It's about to crumble apart. I guess we have to lose it to rebuild it. So this whole idea and this saber rattling, carrying a big stick stuff that Trump is doing, I mean, is it's bully wimp. It's a bully wimp move. We can't back it up. And now, basically, because Venezuela and the world, the global community, the global majority is now gathering as a whole new world order, which is not about conquering people and sitting on people and sanctioning people. It's about allowing nations a chance to trade and transact and grow their industries and not have their money taken by the West for like 500 years and their resources exploited, and the US dollar now turned into a tool of suppression and fear rather than, if the US dollar had no sanctions on it, we'd be all using US dollars now. But we have literally shut the hose, and we can't send our debt over to burden other peoples because soon now, I've been talking about this for decades. The U.S. dollar will no longer have its power because the rest of the world said, we've had enough with you people. And now we have the power and have the help to not have to deal with you people because you're no longer the big hegemon anymore. You're the crumbling hegemon. And so what has happened is Venezuela, which also wants to be part of the BRICS nations, as Brazil already is, um, has the southern the world of the South and Asia and all want peace and prosperity and none of this chaos and war. And so the Russians, just as the Chinese and the Russians, this is what's really helping the protectorate nations that have military and industrial and economic power are there to help these other nations grow into this new civilization. And the West is only excluding itself. There's absolutely no reason why America can't join the BRICS. It's just that they want to play this big hegemonic fossil, which is with clay feet now, clay financial feet. So so the reason why these people who are gung ho to go or have not gone yet is if they do, they could lose their ships and their planes with Venezuela being protected by S-400s and Onyx missiles. Now, the Russians have placed them there, and this is classic the way the Russians would rather do it. They're just there as deterrents. And they've deterred. Because if America goes into this big attack on Venezuela, they're going to lose ships. They're going to lose planes. They're going to have body bags coming home. And, the bully wimp will have to get a bloody nose. if he really wants to mix it up with somebody who can mix it up back. And so they're hung out to dry right now. They did want to go in. So the there was another aspect of that about Venezuela that, a lot of people, I'm sure you're all sitting there, I didn't know about that. It really is true. Go check John Mearsheimer out. They're trying to keep a lid on it. The Russians are doing deterrence. So what's happening here is that, I've always said often on the show how history, as Mark Twain famously said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Well, I've been for decades having this I call it Alice through the looking glass, the karmic echo, where whatever was done before, like Vietnam, quagmire in the jungle, Texas president launching an invasion I mean Vietnam, it is launching an invasion on Vietnam, North Vietnam, uh, on a false flag. It wasn't a reality. That the Gulf of Tonkin incident never happened. It was probably distant lightning, and some tropical distant lightning storm. People started firing at it. I mean, the whole thing happened. And it was completely erroneous. And then once we were in, they didn't care. They just, we were doing Operation Rolling Thunder and bombing North Vietnam. And I watched it all live when I was growing up. And so, what we have here is a reverse image of Vietnam. Well, the reverse image that happened before was Operation Iraqi Freedom, which was also based on a lie, based on now a Republican Texan president. And the reverse image was not a dark, dank forest, but a desert country, a quicksand form of military quagmire. And it certainly was. So that's kind of how karmic echoes work. Well, this is a more interesting karmic echo because it is a new Vietnam, only it's more mountainous. It has 30 million, 35 million people. It's not a divided state in civil war. It is a united state. And not only is it that, the ability for every guerrilla, every mercenary you can think of from the entire South American continent wanting to come in and pitch in. This is like Vietnam having all Southeast Asia's forces coming into the fight. So it is bigger, it is more magnified, it is more impossible to achieve. And like with Vietnam before, they were sending weapons. Most of the weapons that the North Vietnamese used were from Russia. Well, now Russia is helping this Vietnam of South America to defend itself, to deter this. The other thing, too, that it's an echo of is the Cuban Missile Crisis. Um, Russia was, the reason why Russia put missiles in Cuba was exactly because we did the same thing first, putting missiles in Turkey that were only a few hundred miles off this Black Sea coast, right into the center of Russia. And so, ironically, the Russians actually strategically got what they wanted. I mean, Khrushchev would look at those, he'd be on his dacha in Crimea, waving his vodka glass at the horizon, saying, over that horizon are a bunch of U.S. missiles that can knock Moscow in 5 minutes. Why can't we do that in Cuba? Because his whole idea was, we will deter you from threatening our cities, our decapitating us with a surprise nuclear strike. We will do what you've done in with your Hercules missiles. We will do it with our SAM missiles and other missiles and regional ballistic missiles in Cuba. And most Americans don't know this, that as much as Khrushchev with bravado, tried to hide the fact, he literally almost sent every missile that they had, which wasn't a lot. Yeah, we had 3-4 times more nuclear bang than the Soviets did at that point. Um, that was almost all their missiles. But they, made it like, oh yeah, we got a lot more, over here. But no, if that had gone off into a nuclear war where the Soviet Union would have been absolutely destroyed, we would lose about 20 million people, which would be pretty bad. But of course, nobody knew then about nuclear winter. So, and it would have been the doom for everyone. Because some of the studies of nuclear winter say that it could go on for decades, maybe 4 or 5 years, where the sun is as dim as well, just a smudge, even not as bright as the moon. Um, and it could last for 5 years, and then the effects of it would take decades to go away. The ozone layer would be completely destroyed. So if you could get out under the sun, you would be suffering from all kinds of cancers, skin blind, eye blindness, stuff from the radiation, until the ozone layer slowly rebuilt itself. Um, so you can see that analogy in movies like Threads, which was a movie that came out a few years after The Day After. And it's a British production. It's actually more more shocking than even The Day After, because they didn't know for sure about nuclear winter but they did by then, and they had it in. And it's like an, oh, by the way, this is much worse than the nuclear war. So anyway, um, so we have kind of a Cuban Missile Crisis, but so what happened was that the short story of this is that it finally came towards the end of the 13 days. It came to what the Soviets had kind of hoped would happen. I mean, they were surprised that we reacted so strongly. They didn't understand that Americans have never had empires on their borders like all the European countries. I mean, they've never had, like Russia has had, being invaded by Napoleon, Hitler, Charles XII of Sweden, the Teutonic Knights, the Livonian Empire, the Polish-Lithuanian Empire. Um, so it was in Khrushchev's DNA just to go, well, he calculated wrong. He didn't understand that the Americans way out there, far away in their big oceans, with very docile neighbors, were just absolutely freaking out. Kennedy was freaking out because it wasn't in the American experience. It wasn't in our DNA. And we were very much overreacting because it wasn't in our DNA. And so strangely enough, the Cuban Missile Crisis did end up with the Hercules missiles 6 months after, privately, not publicly, being withdrawn from Cuba. And the Russians, then diplomacy could work. He knew Kennedy would do, and Robert Kennedy was the go-between for Brighteon. It was the back channel to Khrushchev. And basically he said, we can't do a quid pro quo, but if you take your missiles back home and we inspect them and they go back home, we can give you a private assurance that in 6 months, the Hercules missiles will be quietly dismantled. So basically, Khrushchev and the Soviets got the strategic need to get those missiles off their border. And in an odd way, that's probably how they were planning to have it done. When the missiles were shown, when they would finally announce it, then they would say, okay, we'll move these missiles out of Cuba if you move the Hercules missiles out of Turkey, which are too close to our centers of government. So, so what I'm hoping is that if this is a karmic echo or Alice through the looking glass, what I'm hoping is that we, in this reflection, this rhyme of a potential Cuban missile crisis becoming a Venezuelan missile crisis, is that going to war has already been stymied. You know, if maybe I'm going to be wrong, and those idiots are going to go in anyway. I mean, I gotta say, when hegemonic empires are dying, when Rome was dying, they usually do really stupid things and hasten up the decline. So there's almost in the DNA of 500 years of Western dominance of the world, colonial dominance of the world. There's a lot of people who they're unconsciously going to go there and get in the fight anyway, and really get themselves knocked on their butts. And that's, the knocked on their butt moment is looming. It's looming in Ukraine right now as I'm watching almost everything I've been saying over the years, even before this war started, is happening. It's unraveling. So, but before I get into that subject, just a little more about Venezuela, because what I've seen happen is it started with deterrence. It's, the Russians have moved their missiles in after we started threatening. That's a reverse image. It would be like if the Russians had been threatening us with missiles, then they would have how to put it, if the Russians played the Hercules card and put the missiles in first in Cuba to counteract the Hercules U.S. missiles in Turkey. Um, this is a situation where Russia made the move first to protect Venezuela after we made the conventional threat, an economic threat, and then put our navies there. And then so they moved the missiles. It would be like if Cuba was a reverse, if it was the Americans just decided they were going to invade Cuba and liberate it, and then the missiles suddenly were put in. It's a reverse image of what happened. They were already there, and they were there to invade Cuba because they were there. But there were no missiles in Venezuela until we threatened to turn it into yet another failed. We saved that nation of 35 million people by destroying it. Um, and so they're really in a bind. I think they really wanted to go in, do a decapitation, put this idiot Nobel Peace Prize woman who's an absolute fascist in power, which it just stinks of failure. I mean, and we'd have the entire continent of South America fighting us in jungles. And we don't have the forces we had back in 1960s. We are a shadow of what we were back then. We don't have the draft. We can't, hell, we can't even put more than 12,000 people into that big invasion. We stuck 500,000 in Vietnam, and it was without a blink because we had the draft. Because the whole nation had, if we went to wars, and the problem with the draft, the reason why we don't have it since Vietnam is when you have a draft, that means everybody, including the Congress, sons and daughters of the Congress, and yours and my daughters, the draft comes up and they're sent to fight the war. People were alert. People were saying, hey, why are we in Vietnam? My son's in Vietnam. It's a very small dimension of American society that becomes professional soldiers. They're mostly from the South, mostly the white poor, mostly new citizens from other countries who want to go on the fast track by risking their life in war for this country to become normalized citizens. That's a very small side set of people. And the sad thing is, they've been mostly exploited in all these wars we've done to destroy nations to save them and destroy a whole lot of our own boys and girls psychologically, physically, and mortally. And the death rate in the veterans communities is higher than the death rate in Iraq and Vietnam sometimes. And because it was it's immoral form of fighting. We weren't defending ourselves. We were the SS invading the Soviet Union, creating Lebensraum. You know, it it's and it's immoral. I mean, Ecclesiastes does say there's a time for war. And I would say right now, all this silliness about trying to negotiate 28 points, 15 points, God knows what the point of it is. that everybody's making their own versions. Oh, now the Ukrainians had their version. Now the Germans have this version. And you know what? The Russians never got it. They never got the official points. Yes, Lavrov and Putin is like, well, we never got it. We never actually never sent us what we could call the thing for negotiation, but they were all sending it out to each other. This is the silly world we live in right now. Silly with nukes. So I am hoping that what has happened is that Venezuela is not going to be attacked. That this is a good version of putting missiles, uh, not and then not missiles close enough to affect us. They're missiles just to protect Venezuela from a surging enemy, an empire whose only interest in that place is not the people of Venezuela, it's the gas and oil. The whole strategic thing is that if China is getting oil from Russia, then we need to find a place in the Western Hemisphere that has as much oil as Russia has, so that we have our own independent source of oil. And you know what's so odd about it? Do you know that Maduro, the president of Venezuela, first off, in the first few days of this, actually before it happened, he said he's had agreements where you can take as much oil as you like. He was making a long-term thing, and if we were smart, we would have helped the infrastructure of Venezuela's oil systems, which really needs improvement. It's really rusting and having problems. He was offering it to us. Venezuela was offering it to us. And the answer was to play gunboat diplomacy. Yeah. Is it true, or I just dreaming that we have a second cognitively declining president after Biden? You know, it's um, it's amazing. So it could end up a positive Cuban missile slash Venezuelan missile crisis that we're in now, and it looks like the hegemon blinked. And now he's got to quietly, kind of slowly remove the troops and stop bombing all those Colombian fisher people. A couple hundred now are dead, that's absolute murder. That is not international law supported what's going on. Um, yeah. So if that's how it all ends, that the tragedy is only all these poor people were sitting ducks in their fishing boats, well, it's sad, but it could have been so much worse. Um, so another front um, is Ukraine. It is uh, Ukraine is really starting to unravel, and there's movement all along the line. Um, there's clearly a lot of all I'm going to say is you're going to see a lot, all you people who want to see movement. Well, I always said in a war of attrition, which is not about taking land, because you don't have to take the land in a war of attrition until you've destroyed the forces on that land. And so the whole thing about wars of attrition is you manage to have dominance of artillery and air and drone, and you make it even hard for the opposite side to even drive towards the front without losing all the way casualties before you even fired a shot. I mean, if you ever heard the story of the Das Reich Panzer Division, when Normandy happened, they were based down in Provence, France. And if you follow the story of when somebody owns the skies, your army is not just getting hit when you're on the front. Your army is getting hit on the road hundreds of miles all the way to the front, and then you get smacked even more at the front. So, the Germans in the Western Front were losing 5, 10 times more soldiers than the Allies were because of that, because of domination of the air. And now we have this new and revolutionary form of warfare, which absolutely changed it, drone warfare. that there you can now surround people on this front by the air. You maybe have three-quarters of a, let's say you have this much of an army surrounded, and then all their roads here are where they get their logistics to keep fighting, their food, their weapons, their bullets, their bombs. And on these three roads, over like 10, 15 miles of them, are hundreds of drones, thousands of drones, and they blow up anything you're driving in. I have seen, in some of my sources, I have seen some of those roads clogged with flaming wrecks. And the other thing I've noticed that in this year, it's very hard to find a military supply truck. I'm literally watching. This year started with all the drone shots of the drones hitting things. They were hitting cars, civilian trucks. Last year, they were still camouflaging them. But now it's getting so desperate and they're losing so many of them. They're literally civilian cars. In fact, I've even seen some of the Russian drones when they thought they were going to hit a bunch of Ukrainians, soldiers, they saw that they were civilians and they pulled off because the civilian, they're looking very carefully to see the Ukrainians on the cars or in the cars that are in earth brown camouflage before they go in. Um, so, so there was an attempt in Pokrovsk, in this encirclement of Pokrovsk, Milograd. There was the Russians were literally digging in and opening it up for the relief force to go in and save the 5 brigades that are trapped in Mirnograd, which used to be 5,500 people. Now there are only 2,000 left standing. And if you've ever studied the Eastern Front in the World War II, when the Germans would get caught and there'd be breakouts, I mean, it is a classic move in the war of attrition, because the Ukrainians have been losing as many, if not more, men and brigades trying to break in, and the Russians retreat back and let them come, get into the range of their artillery and their drones. And the kill ratios, I mean, one of the stupidest things that has been promoted out there in the world is that even today, Keir Starmer, a real bonehead, one of many that are running Europe right now, he was making a speech before the House of Commons, and they were all going, here, 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 and he was like, as it turns now, the Russians have lost over 1 million men in this war. And no, it's about 180,000 KIA. And then you add the wounded, and then you're looking at maybe all told near 250,000 casualties with 180,000 KIA. And the reason is air superiority, drone superiority. The Ukrainians were very good at it. In fact, the Russians learned from them, and then they did them 10 times better. And now, it's the amount of Ukrainians that have died has been at least 1 million killed, and another million that have been incapacitated and crippled by their wounds that can never fight again. Add to that, 350,000 Ukrainians have deserted this year and it's so bad in Ukraine that and you'll see it I'm the gatekeeper, door opener, window opener to you seeing. You can see, I can back all of this up. If you become a subscriber, you'll be able to see it all. You can see it now, actually, if you just start looking for those places. You will see thousands of hours of footage of Ukrainian men being gang beated, dragged into vans, and carted off out of restaurants, on the street, in the church. And these big thugs come in and beat them up. And there's 60,000 Ukrainian military police, a whole army of people that could be fighting on the front, who are doing this across Ukraine. And they make a point of doing it more in the Russian-speaking cities of Ukraine that they still occupy, like Kharkov and Odessa. They make sure they don't grab Ukrainians, and you'll never see any of the rich Ukrainian kids in Kiev. You'll never see it in Kiev because they've bought them off. So, and then the other thing that's happening is that I'll say it again, the missing in action is now in the hundreds of thousands, and the reason why nobody knows is that the from majors on up in the ranks of the Ukrainian officer corps, they are not reporting the missing in action as recovered, because if they do, then they have to start giving the money that they have been pocketing that cannot be given to the family until the deaths are confirmed. So if he's missing, he may still be alive. So what they've done is they've pocketed all that money for themselves, for widows, for children who don't have fathers, all these millions of people in Ukraine. And I I also watch a lot of my contacts are in Ukraine, and they just hate this government. It's amazing. It's very rife for a revolution. In fact, I've even watched some units of the Ukrainian army openly talk about we should turn our backs on the Russians and invade Kiev and clean things up, take all the Nazis out. I'm actually seeing that now openly. So it's like Dr. Zhivago just before the Russian Revolution. If you ever saw the movie, it's like it's building. There's a wave, and it's the Ukrainian government. Well, they're all leaving now. Yermak. Oh, by the way, Yermak, who's really the power behind Zelensky, the actor, Yermak, who this big guy's like twice the size of the little guy who can play pianos with his nards, and he's now said, "I'm going. This is so unfair. I'm a virtuous man. I am going to the front," he said, and I think he will, but not anywhere dangerous because of a certain law. If you're drafted into the army, all investigations into your business, whatever it is dropped. So he's putting on the uniform so he doesn't get put in jail. And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to the front. Well, he's a big target." It's just like, good luck with that. But he's going to probably just put on a uniform and still stay in the Kiev and still do the money thing and all that. So I mean, the Ukrainian government is so terribly corrupt. You know that the polls that are saying in Ukraine that they absolutely hate this. It's like 80-90% hate the government of Zelensky and the way things go, and 80 or 90% of them want the war to end. So it's terrible about how the power systems are being bombed, but that is strategic. It might take, I mean, literally, the Russians, this is war, folks. This is not pussyfooting about. And the thing is that I've been watching this war coming since 2014, when the civil war between Russian-speaking Ukrainians and neo-Nazi Western Ukrainians started. And they ran the show. They were bombing the Donbass for 8 years, killing tens of thousands of civilians. I saw a lot of it, a lot of the footage. Cluster bombs right in the center of only hitting civilians. They were not hitting any military targets. I saw it. I've seen hundreds of hours of hell of it since 2014. So karma came home to roost on this fascist regime. And unfortunately, one of the things of war that's, to turn off all the gas and all the power at wintertime is an inducement to overthrow that government. It's war is war. The Russians never wanted to go there, but since they got provoked, you provoke the bear, honey, he's going to eat you. So, don't provoke the bear. I mean, this isn't the first time this has happened. No, Napoleon, Hitler, 800 years of it. don't poke the Russian bear because he doesn't want Europe. He doesn't want Europe. My God, the way Europe is now, it's not worth having. Even we don't want Europe anymore. It's a mess. But anyway, so any questions
We do have one on X.
on X?
On. Wait, hold on. Oh.
Yeah, I'm not going there.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
John, what do you think of the Nazi leftover influence in Ukraine too? Is that a true influence?
Oh, yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, the Bandera.
Yeah.
I'm not there. I have a Russian friend who mentions the Nazi influence with this leftover um, influence from World War II that's still there and was being uh, was a factor in Donetsk and Lugansk. And I'm just saying it's underreported, and I just trying to figure out what the truth is there.
Yeah, well, first thing I can do is tell you to go to my Hogue Prophecy archives, and there's about 50 articles in there. If you search Ukraine in the search, you will find them all, and you will see my reporting since 2014, and you will see some of the links to the massacres and the things that happened. And I can tell you in a personal story, I had a direct exposure to the Ukrainian Nazi problem. And it's true about Bandera. Stefan Bandera and the Banderites were fascist Germany's best non-German allies. So much so that they even became a major part of managing the Holocaust and all the death camps. Most of the people that were running the gas chambers were not Germans, they were Ukrainian fascists. And of the OUN uh, group. Um, all their flags are back from those days. I have footage of torchlight parades that consistently go. In fact, one of my sources in Kiev, I think she's a kind of pro-nationalist because she actually made the mistake of broadcasting even a recent one last week with all the marching and the straight arms and the Slava Ukraina, Slava Ukraina. And there's also links to documentaries that I have, one that the BBC did in 2015, where they showed how the whole National Guard system, all the territorial guards, it's all part of the Banderites or Pratley sector, right sector. The So I back it all up, and one of the very interesting things that happened to me is when I started showing the massacre in the Temple of Labor, where a lot of people were peacefully Russian, because the Russian-speaking city, and they were saying, "Hey, stop the massacres in Mariupol that were going on at that time." And the answer was there was a big torchlight parade, which I have photos of, and where they went up and down the streets of Kiev, and then they got in their buses and on the trains, and they drove down to Odessa, and they took down the kind of People's Park, the camp, the peaceful camp. They burned it down, beat everybody. The people ran into the Temple of Labor to be protected by the building and locked the doors. Then gathering all around there, including the governor of Odessa and the chief of police and all of them, and a lot of Banderites with their yellow and blue Wolf angle suns, swastikas galore. And they started throwing torches into the place and they set it on fire. And then some of the people inside were climbing out on the windows and they were waiting on the ground for them to take a jump, and then they rushed in like wolves and beat them to death. I saw it. And, that's when I said, man, if I were a younger man, you know, I might, this is like if you were a young man and Franco was doing atrocities in Spain, you might want to go fight on the Republican side, the Spanish Republic in the Civil War that's happening there. I mean, too old for that, but I was thinking, man, I can understand why young men go, hey, that's wrong. That is just so wrong. And and the other thing happened was that I was getting all kinds of threats on Facebook from, and I thought, well, I back then you could kind of go to everybody's, you still can, but you can go to everybody's, these people who are threatening me, all have, all have Facebook pages. So I went and visited their Facebook pages. And so I did a research, a reporting research, where I said, okay, all these people seem to be coming from the areas outside of Ontario, in the state of Ontario, near the main city there that starts with an M. I'm sorry, Canadian friends. I can't remember. It's the Montreal, no, not Montreal. It's the where are the Blue Jays, folks? Where are the Blue Jay baseball?
Toronto.
What's that?
Toronto Blue Jays.
Toronto Blue Jays. Thank you very much. Yeah, so they were all around Toronto. Well, I thought that's strange. Why are they all around? Because what I saw on their Facebook pages, they were like, they're Nazis. They're like really proud straight arming Nazis. And I said, where are all these Nazis come into Canada? Well, I did, as I do, my own reporting research, and I discovered that the Galicia division, which was at one point 12 to 15,000, 20,000 men with full Panzer battalions, APC, armored personnel carriers, everything. They were suited up just like any SS division of Germans. And they were fighting, and most of the fighting they did was actually massacring Poles and Slovaks and Czechs towards the end of the war. But then they ended up bumping into the Soviet army around Lvov, Western Ukraine, and they really got decimated. And so by the time the war ended, they managed to retreat into Italy out of Eastern Europe, and they then surrendered near Venice, around that area. They surrendered to the British forces. So the Britons, they had 20,000 men left. So those men were then shipped to, as you know, they're saying we fought the Soviets. We want to be like Americans and British. So that's how they lied about it. And then they went and they were protected, and they were moved to England. But after a while, when people really found out how this politically smelled, they then moved them all to outside of Toronto. Most of them live outside of Toronto. So these people that were attacking me were the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Banderite fascists, of the Galicia division. So I've had a direct experience of the Nazi problem in Ukraine, as well as showing the footage, showing it. It's extensive. And just the Biden administration, but Barack Obama's administration, with Victoria Nuland, no less, who was then a deputy secretary of state, not the second in command of the secretary of state, where she even did more things for them during the Biden era. But she was sent to with the American ambassador of Ukraine to pick a government that was the who's who of fascist Ukraine, that they were going to help right sector cause a false flag, which they did. They were up on the buildings in the Maidan Square, firing at everybody, even their own. And they're up on this building, and they did studies of it. They know where all the shooting was coming from. It was the top of the burned out embassy that they were using as their headquarters during the Maidan revolution, where all the people were in tire barricades from the fall of 2013 into late February of 2014. Now, Putin and the Russians and Western leaders had resolved the problem about Yanukovych, who was elected by a majority of people, but he's from the Donbass. He's a Russian Ukrainian. And they finally, that's how the Maidan thing was foisted. And the CIA and all were in it. Like, this was one of the several color revolutions that happened since Ukraine broke away from Soviet Union. And the this they basically aided a man named Dmitry Yarosh, really evil looking guy. He makes Zaluzhny, who kind of has a bit of the charm of Hermann Goering. I mean, he also has the same face as Hermann Goering. I wonder if he's a reincarnation. Um, he he's well, Yarosh is a really heavy guy, and he is like Nazi central. So you could do him from central casting. And his group did most of the shooting, and then they chased the last democratically elected leader of Ukraine out of the presidential palace, and cast them out. So the famous phone call that the Russians had a wiretap on it. So we actually have documentation of, okay, you pick Klitschko here, and then we'll have Yats. And no, we can't have the guy who's now the current mayor of Kiev. No, he's too independent. No, we got to have these guys. And they're literally picking Nazis. And then he said, well, what about the Europeans? We got to talk to them. Now, I'm not going to say the word, but she basically famously, for a whole Europe to hear, she said, oh, F the Europeans. F them. So, and that got all over the place in 2014 that she did that. So anyway, she talked about how they put $5 billion into the whole system of doing this regime change, color revolution, overthrowing a democratically elected government. Some democratic country are we, the way we do that. We do that a lot, way too much. About 80 times it's been shown since World War II, 82 times that we've insinuated ourselves in overthrowing democracies mostly. And so what that did is it created suddenly 20, 30 million well, not that many, but about 30 to 40% of Ukraine is Russian. And surprising, a lot of all those places that Russia wants back, well, it didn't want them back, that the Ukrainian Russians there wanted to be a part of Russia because they're basically Russian oblasts. Kharkov is also a Russian oblast, it's a Russian-speaking city. Odessa is, as is Kherson, and the Donbass, the Lugansk and Donetsk oblasts are all, they never were part of Ukraine. Ukraine has never been a country until 1991. It has been a place where the Soviet Union dumped a whole lot of people, never asking if they wanted to be a part of Ukraine. I mean, what kind of country do you have when your name, Ukraina, means hinterland? So what's your country's name? Hinterland. Is that a right translation? Oh, maybe I should call it the borderlands. How can a country be borderlands? Border of what? Well, Russia. Okay. So Tijuana is going to be the great borderland country of Mexico. It's like it's not a country, and it's failing because it's not a country. And what is also not told is how hard, to a fault, and actually Russians are a lot pissed off about this with Putin. They love him, but they really don't like how gullible he is. And even he admitted on Russian television when he was asked straight up by a reporter, well, we know about all these mistakes. Well, what were your mistakes, Mr. President? Would you imagine saying that to Donald Trump or Biden? And the way he responded to it was Putin was like, his body language was really telling. He didn't go, I didn't do anything wrong. He was kind of sitting there listening to him going, and what were your mistakes? And he kind of went like this. where do I begin? He rolled his eyes and he said straight up, I'm too gullible. I just keep trusting the Western people. They're going to, I'm a negotiator. I would add, he's a Libran. He wants to make peace. I watched him with the Minsk 1 and 2 attempts to try to solve this. You know, there are three times where diplomacy could have prevented all this or stopped this civil war from happening and prevent what has come since. Do you know that in less than a week after being provoked by the NATO trained army that NATO had amassed on the border of the disputed Donbass. They did it in April of 2021, and the Russians got there really fast and stopped it. And they started building up for it again in October of 2021. In my Hogue prophecy articles, I was telling my people about it. And I said, look, they're mixed units. They're getting ready for an offensive. You know, they're putting tanks and armored personnel carriers. It's not like a defensive line. They're setting up for an offensive, multitasking unit attack. And they were starting the attack in February. They started shelling the place like the OCE were the people monitoring that place had never seen before. And it was all coming from the Ukrainians. And that is when, for a third time, the Russian leaders of Donbass and Lugansk went to Moscow and say, we're mobilizing. They're going to try to ethnically cleanse us with this offensive and send us all, who they don't kill, the millions of us, into Russia. We want to become part of the Russian Federation. Let us do that. And actually, now Putin had already done Minsk 1, and that would have and then there was Minsk 2. What these are, you don't even hear about these arrangements, but basically what they were doing was to try to create a situation where he never wanted any of these extra states to come in. The Russians weren't doing that. They were saying, well, what would be best is let Donbass and all these places be a part of Ukraine, but what they need that they don't have now is a federalized government. That is where the oblasts, the states of Ukraine, have the right to trade and associate culturally or industrially with whomever they wish to be with. I mean, one of the big problems that was developed by what the US helped happen with the Nazis in power is that, half of Ukraine is populated mostly by Russians on this side of the Dnieper, the eastern side, the river that divides it. And they were openly saying, if the Western Ukrainians want to have fun with the Europeans and all, great. Why shouldn't Lvov decide to do more trade with them? Why shouldn't Zitomir and all those places want to associate with those people that, in fact, until Stalin took it all and put it into Ukraine, it used to be all part of Eastern Poland. And most Ukrainians used to live in Poland. In fact, even to this day, Lvov, which is the westernmost capital, kind of Nazi central in extreme Western Ukraine, is by demographics majority Polish. I checked it out. And so, let them be back into that, or let them have their own little Bandera stand right there, and the Europeans can have them. We are culturally Russians, and so we want to do business with Russia and all of that. So this whole Ukraine could have remained if it had turned into a federalist government where the states have the rights and more autonomy. That's what Minsk 1 and 2 was trying to do. And it later came out that the two Western leaders, Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande, were the Chancellor of Germany and the President of France, respectively. They were going to guarantee these Minsk agreements. But it was finally, Merkel was exposed by a couple guys that really, they do crank calls, and they say, well, this is I am Zelensky, and I wanted to talk to you, Miss Merkel, about a certain thing, and they always get away with it because they're very funny. And so Merkel picked up the phone and she spilled the beans. She said openly, "Well, those Minsk thing, we were only just trying to buy time so we could train the Ukrainians and arm them for a war with Russia." She said it. And then Hollande, after she admitted it by accident because she was on the crank call, he stepped up and said, "Yeah, I was doing the same thing. No, we weren't really about peace. We were shining the Russians on." So you will not hear that, but that happened. And I can prove it. And the people I am source have the sources and proof of it. And so then, um, what then happened, most people don't know this, when the war finally started in late February, the Russians made a lot of moves and kind of took a lot of territory, and then suddenly they were right surrounding Kiev. That that was a maneuver that successfully hatched out within less than a week. Zelensky and his government desperately wanting to talk about ending the conflict, and they started. They started in Minsk, and then eventually they moved to be hosted by Erdogan of Turkey in Istanbul. And within a month, they had and this was the plan of the Ukrainians that the Russians liked, and they signed off on all of it. It was they got no more of centralist government, freedom of the oblasts, Ukrainian or Russian oblasts in Ukraine to govern themselves more than from a centralized government. They got the Russians didn't ask for any territory. They didn't even ask for Crimea. It was all, as long as all you need to do, the Russians' main point is very simple. Well, idiots apparently can't get it because they're in power and they're not getting it. No NATO in Ukraine. It's already in your constitution, Kev. Read your own constitution. I've read it. It says that we must remain neutral. The whole way that the Soviet Union agreed to let Ukraine, a big hunk of it, leave was the guarantee that it would not become a NATO member. And why?
John, can I ask who was the president at the time that was negotiating that Minsk deal on the behalf of Russia?
It was Obama.
On the side of Russia.
Yeah, well, let me see. Let me think. No, actually, let's see. When the war started in 2022, yes, it was Biden.
So he was negotiating with Putin at that point in time.
No, he wasn't actually. He had one meeting with him in Helsinki, and then Biden basically didn't talk to him for 3 years. Pretty weird, isn't it? When we had a Cuban Missile Crisis, when there was constant connection, Biden and his EpiPen handlers didn't want to have anything to do with that. It's very dangerous.
And Poroshenko, would Poroshenko then been in power?
Poroshenko was in power until 2019. First, there was the government full of who's who of fascism, and then Poroshenko then won the election, but people couldn't stand him. He was like oligarch as you can get. And so there was this. This is where fact goes beyond fiction. I've seen The Servant of the People, the documentary that Zelensky did. He's very funny and he's a very good dancer and actor. It's too bad he made the mistake of trying to get into politics. But what they did is it was a film that Kolomoisky, one of this Israeli-Ukrainian guy who bankrolled him, he literally was trying to put a puppet in, and he started off with this wonderful documentary where this is just some school teacher. He doesn't even want to be president, but he kind of, after all one thing after another, he ends up just being a simple man, a Mr. Smith going to Washington Ukrainian style, and he ends up becoming the president to make things better for everybody. And so when that movie came out, and then when 2019 came around, when they have their 5-year presidencies, I believe it's in odd years, um, he created the party that is named after the series. He literally turned. I mean, this is even beyond Trump and The Apprentice and stuff. It literally became a party, and it won. I think 80% of the vote because he promised I'd get down on my knees before Putin if I had to end this war, to stop all this stuff and make this all right. And the Ukrainian people trusted him, and they voted him into a landslide, kicking out Poroshenko, who all he could say in a famous speech that's out there on the internet if you want to see it. He was he was saying, our kids will go to school. Your kids will be hiding in basements. The kids, fellow Ukrainians in the Russian Ukrainian states. We will have food. You will be starving. We will be bombing you. This guy was a beast. And it's all there.
And I think to your point, didn't he also withhold, Biden in this CFR meeting said he was going to withhold the $2 billion to Poroshenko if he didn't fire the lead prosecutor in the corruption of Burisma?
Oh, yes, that's all true. I wrote some articles about it in Hogue Prophecy Report. Yeah, and they're in my Hogue Prophecy archives. Yeah, he did that, and then he bragged about it. I think in 2015, the famous tape where he talked about, well, I'm not going to give you your $1 million, and it says, and and he openly showed his quid pro quo. He showed that he's must feel familiar to be in Ukraine because he's as corrupt as the Ukrainian politician. Yeah, no, that all happened. That all happened.
Can I ask you one other question? I'm
Mhm.
sorry. The one thing I find fascinating, people take for granted our experiment that we happened here with, and even it was very divisive. It didn't look like it was going to happen in the setting up of our constitutional republic. I kind of take people back, like, what is Putin in the aftermath of the absolute shit show that followed from Perestroika, and who was involved in that? What, I mean, do people expect that Russia would just naturally adopt a constitutional republic? Or like, what does it take? Do you see, having seen the mess that you've seen, how do people want self-rule? And can they even organize themselves in such a way? Or does it kind of require what happened here, sort of a miracle? Like, how do you see a country transitioning to what we associate with, say, a free society?
Yes. Well, first of all, the first thing that Americans need to learn is our society is an American free society that has been evolved out of our American culture. That and one of the big myopic things that Americans do about the world is they just presume that our form of democracy must be everybody else's, completely ignorant of the other societies. For instance, how many Americans know how deeply based Chinese civilization is on Confucianism? It is, or that the Chinese people have in their culture a feeling less of what I'm doing and as an individual. Well, this one teacher I had when I was in high school said that they were all walking on the beach, and if it was a Westerner on the beach, they'd just be walking wherever they felt to go, and that's fine. That's us. But the Chinese said, let's all walk down this way on the beach together. The feeling of community from the ancient Confucianist ideas is very profound. So the other thing that's very important with the Chinese civilization, I'll give you an example before I go to the Russian, is that uh, China is about finding harmony between opposites. It's very fundamental to understanding China. I mean, it would be like if we were Star Trek. You know, in Star Trek, they don't just decide to go to some alien planet and just presume they're going to do what people in the Federation do. They have to kind of be careful and more cognizant of different ways people evolve. Well, it's no different in other countries. I mean, I had some sources that got me in touch with sources because I've always been fascinated by this very hard, impossible thing that the Chinese are trying to do, finding harmony between communism and capitalism. The Chinese, unlike the Soviet Union, always knew that they needed capital, as Marx in Das Kapital, wealth, to fund a communist society. Because that if you don't have wealth, you're going to only share poverty. And if Marx had lived long enough to see the Soviet Union created, he would have gone, well, I'm as perplexed as I'm happy that you're trying to make a communist system. But when I wrote Das Kapital, I said it can only possibly happen if it has any success. It must happen either in the British Empire or in the United States because they have capital. You have no capital. What are you going to share other than just poverty? So, the Chinese tried to do it the wrong Marxist way, not the un-Marxist way. And then it went really to hell in the 60s with the Cultural Revolution, because unfortunately, I think Mao was suffering a similar cognitive decline that our current president and the previous one had. But he had the kind of power where he could make his dementia a policy. And it was a demented revolution. And they survived it. And then Deng Xiaoping came in, and he finally started in the late 70s a move towards more capital. So we have to build we can't have a workable communist system if we do not have free enterprise. Also, though a very different beast than what we want to do. And then you build over time capital, and that is what they've done. They've actually now have the capital. Now, people ask, why don't you ever let millionaires and billionaires run for office in Chinese Politburo? He said, well, we've watched you. We've watched how if you do that, then it becomes an oligarchy. And so the Chinese, if you want to be a capitalist in China, you can. To make more wealth and for the whole country is great, and you're off to do it. But you'll never be pulling the strings of political power in China. That is reserved to the communists who understand capitalism is required for communism to thrive. Now, you ask any Chinese leader about this, they know full well how difficult this is because they're doing something that my master Osho once said. He said probably the most pure form of politics, of government, would have to be a harmony between democracy and totalitarianism. And that's what the Chinese are trying to do. They're trying, and it's strange because unlike our system is pretty straight up, but if you go to Iran and look at their democracy, if you go what goes on democracy in China, it has layers. For instance, in Iran, there's two layers to the Iranian political system, and it's very democratic. Everybody if you go in Iran, as people that I know have gone there, like Max Blumenthal and others, they are constantly arguing about politics. They do a lot. They're more politically interested than we are at all here. You go in any of the shops and stuff, and people speak freely about that. The way they've got it set up is that you can vote in anyone. In fact, the person that's the president of Iran right now is, not with the sheiks, not with the ayatollahs that much. He's a liberal. That's what the people voted him in. And as long as the Council of Ayatollahs and the Supreme Leader are kind of like a it's kind of like a messianic system. There are some when people are waiting for the Messiah to come and the King of David to be restored. The Messiah, is actually a king who is both temporal and religious leader of the country. The closest thing to a Messiah, politically speaking, that's around today are two figures: the Ayatollah, who is the supreme leader, and the Dalai Lama of Tibet. They are both temporal, balancing temporal and religious rules and laws. So the Council of Ayatollahs has to be elected every 3 years with a new set of people. And the supreme leader has kind of last say with what they do, but they're basically there to make sure that Islamic Sharia law is in balance with political democratic laws. So that's a very, very overview of a very complicated but interesting political system, is Iran. Now, in China, they're seeking a balance between the totalitarianism of a communist system balanced in the free flow of free economy and wealth making. And the interesting thing about their electoral system is that all the people in their local governments absolutely have the power to vote for their local governments and local cities and local town mayors and stuff like that. And then what they have is a tiered system, a little bit like a meritocracy, where the people get to vote, and then they vote the people that are immediately um, overseeing life and stuff. And that group of people then vote for the next tier. And that smaller group of people vote for the next tier until you get up to the big conference that they have in October, where you have the top tier of people that are their job elected by people in different, people who know the things, from the people up. It has a quality of meritocratic democracy about it. So, you know, these are some of the things I write about and talk about in my Hogue Prophecy reports that you won't hear much about. But it's a we are so it is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness that we are naturally, as a people, American people, isolationists. What is so strange about us becoming, it's so perverse for us to be an empire. It's really not American. It's not how we move. It's not how we are. And, to be this hegemon is so toxic to America that it's going to destroy it. I would even say now, I think it'd be a very healthy thing if we stop nation building and nation destroying outside of this country and bring it all home. Shut down those bases, bring everybody home, and just deal with just us being the nation of Americans in a community of nations, like not long before all this started, this empire. That's who we were before the end of World War II. We were just a nation with other nations. We were a power with other powers. Even Trump, before he started going down the tubes with his mind, was promoting the concept of, trying to find great agreements with great powers that keeps the balance of power in the world. And that looked like, well, that would be a good start. That'd be a good bridge away from being the unipolar, I'm Atlas holding up all of your spheres of influences, and go to hell. That's it doesn't work anymore. And there's so many things that we need to do to fix our own country right now. But when we become the hegemon, we literally put 800 bases all over the planet. And on those bases, And with all those embassies and stuff all over the planet, even when we're in the homes of people of a completely different culture, we tell them what China is all about because it's our opinion of what China is must be so because we're just isolationists and we literally stand in their faces and tell them how they should be. That is a very sick version of isolationism where we are actively spreading our isolationist ideas. You know, we're the city on the hill, we're the greatest country in the world. Oh, please. You impoverish yourself by living in such narrow views, America. You don't open your eyes and your mind to the richness of this world. And if you did, maybe it's good you don't, because you'd be so damned embarrassed of how stupid you all sound to the rest of the world. And they're very tolerant of us. I must say, too tolerant about that.
We have
Go ahead.
another question on X Spaces. So Jay, just you can ask your question.
Hey, John. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Yes.
Hey, yeah, I've been listening to you two for years on the coast, and I can't wait to hear you come on like the New Year's Eve show.
I hope so.
Do that.
I hope I will.
Okay. All right. So I just
You know why.
well, we'll see. But so I have one or two questions really.
Okay.
So my first question is the Venezuela thing that's going on. I do agree with what you talked about, where you were saying that the why do we need to get involved, and it's not the Monroe Doctrine. So I guess my question for that is like, do you think with all the other global South countries coming together, like you were saying, because we've done this before, like I think with Noriega, we also got him on some drug charges, and I think we've also screwed around in Guatemala and all those other Central American countries.
Helped kill 380,000 peasants.
Right, yeah. But for Maduro, like, is it like, because Venezuela is like the last, so, like, I mean, there is Cuba, but like, that's the thing about Cuba. I don't know what Cuba is nowadays because they, Castro's not around. But like for Venezuela, like, what is the end goal really for that? Because Maduro is gone, but then do we have like just the resources, or like do we, what do we want?
What we want is, we don't give a damn about the Venezuelans any more than we give a rat's damn about Ukraine. I hate to say it, but they're just material. We're there. Those powers that are running this country are just there to exploit that to get to Russia. And those people, those great people down there are in Venezuela. We just want the oil. And the odd thing is, Maduro is going to give it to us. But then there wouldn't be a war. Then there wouldn't be a reason to keep this military budget up to $1 trillion, because we're stuck in this addiction of hegemonic power. And what concerns me so much is that when people are addicted, they usually have to crash all the way, pissing on the street, laying on the street or something before they come out of it, if they survive that. And I'm just seeing how America seems to be hell-bent on going that route, and as a nation, as a political idea. And that's, this bum who's leaking the street around his arms are nuclear weapons, as he's trying to sleep it off. This is the thing that's so really challenging about our times in the latter half of the 2020s. So yeah, it's all about that. It's did you hear me earlier? Well, yeah, you did hear me earlier about the other stuff about Venezuela.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And then my second question is,
yes.
So it's like a two-part question. So about North Korea, like, what's the status of that? Because I remember, Trump, the first time he gets in, he does the big thing with Kim Jong-un. Then he does the second thing that goes sideways because I can't remember. I think it was like the nuclear, do nuclear. He wouldn't give up his nukes,
Yeah.
and then
Why should he?
Then it seems to be not much talk with North Korea nowadays. I mean, I think I heard Trump talk about Kim Jong Un when he got in January, and I haven't heard a single thing about him. And then the second part of the second question is, what do you think about India and how it's going to be growing in the next many years? Because a lot of people think it's like the next hub of I mean it's always been a hub, but but I think like China, like India has a lot of potential with the growth in like the next 50 years, maybe 100 years.
The future will see east and west fade and north and south come into mind as a new way of looking at hemispheres. Going to see some of the great powers of the future will be Brazil, definitely India. China is risen now, and Russia. And what's good about all of these, what's really hopeful, I'd like to say, because it sounds like I'm really alarmist and saying a lot of things that are really going terrible, but in this part, I wanted to say to you that the vast majority of the planet is moving away from this. And that's why the little 17% of the Western world of our population of 8 billion plus people is freaking out and wanting to control everything, because the vast majority of the human race right now, everybody but 17.5%. Now, for those people who have geographical challenges, like some people who write me saying, "Oh, that's not America," this gives you an idea of the American mind. I got this letter saying, "Oh man, you got that totally wrong. It's just 5%, not 17.5%." I said, yeah, as if America is the West. That's what you're saying to me. Yeah, okay, America is the West. All right. I get that. Yes, America is part of that, but this is, as I write about, America is the center of that, and it has its vassals in Europe. Western Europe is the other part. There's another 500 million people there. And then you have the wannabe America of the Asian world, Japan, and then you have Australia and New Zealand, and that's it. You know, and that's about 70.5% of the 8,400,000,000 people on the planet. Everybody else is in the global south or the Eurasian African South American arc of continents. And now there's as every great evolution in human history starts with doing business, transactions. That's what made us at the end of the Ice Age move from being for millions of years hunter and gatherers into civilized, which means sedentary, building a permanent home and farms and having your stock animals and creating wealth that was never possible as hunter gatherers. And that, of course, created the whole, for good and bad, the whole economic system of bartering and trading and using currencies and creating properties, because now you can't just make love to all the women of your little hunter-gathering group or all the men, because you're kind of an extended family of hunters. Now you've got property, and now you've got to really, your wife really has got to be your wife. Marriage became the ultimate primitive property agreement, not about love, but about making sure that this woman and this man doesn't make love with anybody else and make children, because then they will claim the property. So it was pure business that made that transformation. So what we're having happen now with the BRICS nations, and by the way, before 20 years or so ago, before anybody was thinking that thing was any more than a silly debating club, when it was called BRIC, when it didn't have South Africa in its core members, I was writing articles saying, this is going to sound crazy. It even sounds crazy to me, but prophecy is crazy sometimes. I said, this is now I'm seeing for the first time the first step into an entirely different new world order, international global village world order, and the BRICS will be the center of it. I said that 25 years ago. and now they are. And so the BRICS is the biggest thing happening on the planet right now, and it's ending colonialism. The people of Africa, the people of Asia, and other places are now becoming. It helps nations become sovereign, not colonial slaves, and that this is a whole Aquarian age is all about individual sovereignty. It's the main thing where the Piscean age was all about centralized control, power grids, not individual power cells. It was all about building groups of nations and a global government and all of that. Centralizing, there will be a world in 150 years that can look like a global world, but it will be actually governed by its citizenry. The Aquarian age is about masses of people gathering together collectively to create individual sovereignty. So the path to that kind of nation is not Schwab or any of that. I used to think that one world government would be a good idea, but democracy does not survive when it gets too big. It becomes fascism. And we don't even have democracy yet now. We have mobocracy. And that will definitely send us into a fascist crisis. It cannot be avoided. And hopefully, from that experience, we can return to democratic values. But personal sovereignty, eventually, what will happen is there will be one world, but it's going to come from the path of things like the BRICS. First, we need to create a world of community of sovereign nations where you respect each nation's freedom to grow and in its own ways, as long as you are not harming other nations. It's nobody's business what the Chinese are doing or what the Saudis are doing. It's up to them to have the freedom to make their mistakes, to not have some puritanical American idiot come in and say, we're going to clean you up because we're the greatest country in the world and you're all going to get purple fingers from elections in Iraq, and that means democracy is happening to you just because you got a purple finger and we're kind enough not to make you put it on your middle finger. You know, and it's just like, and it doesn't work that way. One of the biggest problems is that America has a puritanical side, being a strongly Protestant nation. And the downside of that is that we presume to clean other people up. I hope that dies soon, because if we looked in the mirror, America, we don't need to clean anybody else up. We need to clean up ourselves.
Very true.
Yeah.
So we're near the end of the show here, but I greatly appreciate the ones that participated with asking questions. Please
Yes.
share the links so we can grow the show. I greatly appreciate it. And
hit the like button.
And
if
hit
you
the
liked
like
what
button.
you just saw, just hit it right now.
Yeah. And also go to the description box within this video, click the link to John's website so you can sign up for his periodical and his readings. So for the ones that don't know about the periodical and the readings, can you briefly explain them?
Yes, I have the Hogue Prophecy Report, which is a PDF file that I send to your email that you use to donate through the links that I have that go from my web page to my page on PayPal, where you can do an automatic payment per month, $5 or a little more, or you can do a one-time 12-month payment for $60. It's just $5. It's a cup of coffee, of good quality coffee, for a whole month. And it is I fully illustrate them. They're PDF files and they're in Adobe, so you can use Adobe Liquid with them so that your cell phone can see them any which way you can comfortably want to see them on cell phone. I mean, with my archives and where my website is now, it is, I'm going to get it cell phone friendly in the new year. But if you have a laptop, it's probably better to read it on a laptop than your cell phone. But that's going to change soon, and it will be as nicely readable as my Hogue Prophecy reports are in Adobe Liquid, which is free. I always have a little advertisement for it. All you need to do is link on it, and then suddenly you won't be moving your cell phone. Like what it's like when you see somebody moving like this and that, and there's, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to read John Hogue. That's going to end soon. Any of you who've had to do that know what I'm talking about. That's gone soon. So yeah, so these there's going to be other things. I'm actually going to have a lot of my free sample articles at hogueprophecy.com, but in another few days I'm going to have everything updated. All the main Hogue Prophecy sample reports are going to be on X, and very easy to read. And that's another way that you can also, when you read these free samples, you can also, if you really feel like supporting this and seeing more than the tip of the iceberg, I give you excerpts from all the ones that are seen by subscribers as well, to see, this is really this wonderful top of the iceberg, but there's all this other stuff that I also put. There was 14 articles in the last one. I'm going to do my new, I always start the year and publish it in February of the predictions for the new year. So predictions for 2026 is going to be my special report that's coming out in February, early February or around February. So that's happening. Now, the second thing is that I also do one-on-one readings through Zoom. You can see me as you see me now, and I'll be talking just to you. And they are sometimes 3 hours long. I mean, I really go deep, and the time really flies. I usually start with the Kelly Blue Book of your body mind vehicle, an astro.com chart of your birth chart or your transit charts with birth chart, which I'll give you the instructions how you can get that free from astro.com, and then send it to me, and then I'll have it posted here, and I will start looking at all the strengths and weaknesses and potentials and challenges and easy things that are there in your chart. And then I will go deeper with a tarot reading, doing the Celtic cross reading, as well as some other empathic things. So it's a lot of fun. People love these readings. It's always playful, even if it goes deep. It's always playful. So I'd love to see you all in person and share with you these things. And please help this work continue by helping. I'm paid only by my readers, so hope I see you there. And please do enjoy the free things too.
So just a reminder, click the link in the description so it takes you to John's website. So thank you everybody for joining. We had a good showing here. Greatly appreciate it. We'll do this again in about 2 weeks. So John, if you can tell everybody goodbye, we can shut down.
Goodbye, everybody.
All right. Thank you everybody for joining. See you in 2 weeks.